Hi, it's Tom Jordan. Very busy day yesterday on the first full day of Donald Trump's second presidency. And I'll just bring up one of the things of many, many things that he did. The president is actually protecting civil rights, ending these race based and sex based hiring practices that are being implemented by the Biden administration. Totally discriminatory practices Donald Trump got rid of. Imagine that, taking skin color out of the decision making process, whether or not someone should be hired or excluded based on race or ethnicity or gender. And yet he's being criticized for doing just that. We'll get into that later in the program today. But let's just say that it is clear there is a much different feel in this country since Monday. Dare I say, a sense of freedom seems to be permeating this country from sea to shining sea. Donald Trump is back, for sure, unapologetically, delivering on his vision to restore the country and put Americans first. From the Capitol Rotunda to the Oval Office, you see right there, he's getting very, very busy. And he outlined on the first day, on Monday, this no holds barred agenda to reverse what he calls a crisis of trust and the horrible betrayal of the Biden administration. So he's got a Republican controlled Senate, just barely, and a House majority, just barely. Donald Trump is wasting no time. So his plan here are these swift executive orders. You see him signing them right there late Monday night and probably early Tuesday morning. Bold legislative moves and unflinching action. As I said earlier, it is unapologetic. In fact, he declared January 20th, 2025, Liberation Day, promising a fresh start for the nation. And his priorities are including, things like securing the border with a national emergency, ending catch and release, and deploying troops to stop illegal immigration. He also declared a national energy emergency, slashing Green New Deal policies and unleashing domestic energy production to fight inflation. It's going to be difficult, I think. There will be some obstacles in his way. Not everybody is totally aligned with these efforts here, particularly Democrats, but also probably some in his own party, which makes it challenging with a slim GOP majority in the House and in the Senate. Gender ideology takes its backseat as Trump reinstates policies recognizing only two genders. That was a bold statement that he made. There are only two genders, male and female. Who would have thought that that was going to be something so incredibly controversial? It's not just a return of Donald Trump, it's a revolution, promising to lead with common sense. I want to bring in someone who knows a lot about this, about politics and this sea change. It feels like a sea change, just going back to more common sense policies. Dennis Darnoi is a political consultant and the founder of Densar Consulting, and Dennis is back with me on the program. Good to see you, Dennis. Thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah, good morning, Tom. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Overall, Donald Trump's declaration of Liberation Day, it sounded for a second kind of corny, like it was something out of a movie. But I thought about, no, this actually, it feels like some sense of liberation is taking place as of Monday. So, in a nutshell, how would you describe what that phrase entails under a Donald Trump's second administration?
Sure. Well, there are many conservatives across many different sectors, whether it was business, whether it was education, many different fields, even in the healthcare field, where they didn't feel as if they could express themselves what they truly believed, so that if something like the issue of DEI came up in a work environment, they didn't feel that they had the freedom to truly express what they were thinking about it, and especially if they disagreed with some of the initiatives that were being passed by executives at a much higher level. So when you talk about this freedom, the sense of liberation, it's that you can now express yourself. You can now have conversations and not really be in fear of whether there's going to be workplace whispers, whether your job is going to be become scrutinized. So things of that nature. And again, no one should be surprised at how quickly Donald Trump acted. He made a number of promises on the campaign trail. He is one who believes in action. We talked about this before, that there are things he can do via executive order, and then there are things that must be done through the legislative process. So the fact that he came in on day one, minute one, prepared, ready to go, moving the government, moving the United States in a direction that he believes he has a mandate to do, really shouldn't be a surprise to anyone. So again, I think that there's this sense of freedom that open dialogue can occur. That again, that dissent's okay, to the extent that again, if somebody wants to argue about what the president did, that they're perfectly welcome, and it's fine to do that. This just is now the policy, the official policy of the United States, and this is where we're going to go. But there really shouldn't be anyone who feels as if they can't express an opinion that
Yeah.
in previous years and under the previous administration, it was a lot harder to have conversations about.
It certainly was. And now we had the freedom to argue again. Like arguments weren't allowed. The one side, and I was just amazed. I was astounded really at what had been going on over the past several years. I mean, the number of incidents that I can just point out that were censored and just what I've witnessed in my own career, how this slide to the left and more authoritarianism, and it was being disguised as something altogether different. I mean, the number of training programs I had to go through with corporate employers, basically saying that my particular skin color and my particular gender was something that was a threat to other employees. So I was the one that needed to change based on my immutable traits. Something like it was just a strange thing. And then the speech that wasn't allowed. Thankfully, I think I absolutely believe that was a violation of individual civil rights. So you look at all these. What I mean, he was so busy, and he promised he would do this. But Monday night, he's at the at Capital One Arena signing these executive orders there in front of maybe tens of thousands of people there in the arena. And then he goes back to the Oval and does the same thing there. He continues this work. When you look at the number of executive orders, I think it's about 200 that he signed to address what he called a crisis of trust in government caused by what he said was the political establishment. And he said those phrases in front of the likes of Joe Biden and Barack Obama when he was giving his inaugural speech. And I was looking at their face to see if they were perturbed by that at all. But the fact of the matter is, it seems to be true. At least he believes that was the case. How does that approach, do you think, this swift action? How will it play out? Is it going to quickly reverse all the things that this previous administration had implemented, or will this take some time?
I think there's two questions in there, because I think the first one is it does establish reestablish trust, because again, what you see is you see someone who is on a campaign trail saying that if you elect me, these are the things I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to do on border security. This is what I'm going to do on immigration. This is what I'm going to do on DEI. This is what I'm going to do to reduce the footprint of the federal government. And here is someone who comes in on day one and executes on the very things that he said. Now, are there some things that are controversial in that? I would argue yes. I do think that the blanket pardons of the people who participated in January 6th is something that he had said he was going to do. Some of his advisors, including the vice president, said, no, we think it will be a little more limited than that. But again, this is a situation where he came in and he executed on something that he said he was going to do. I do think that creates a little bit of problems for some people, for some Republicans, and they've stated as much. But again, it establishes that sense that I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do, which you really don't, or haven't seen a lot with the president and many of the members in the former president's administration. So I do think that that's the first part of it, and then the second part of it is there are going to be challenges, so it's not going to be an immediate reversal. Things such as just having two genders on a passport and in all official U.S. documents. That's something that you're going to see take over immediately. But for example, when you talk about the Dreamers and his executive order on Dreamers, that's already met with legal challenges. And I mean that was literally right out of the gate. People were ready to challenge that. So again, that's something that's probably going to get stayed, and then you have to go through the whole court process. It's something that's going to eventually, I believe, make its way back up to the United States Supreme Court. They've ruled twice, not directly regarding what he's doing, but they've ruled twice that the president doesn't have the authority, that it's unconstitutional to do. So we'll see if there's been anything that changes in how he's trying to execute this. So yes, there will be some things that out of the gate you're going to see. And again, remember, he wanted on day one to have immigration activities in Chicago and Illinois, and I believe Los Angeles, but because those plans were leaked in advance, he wasn't able to execute it, and is going to identify a different time that they can do that. But again, that would be something that he talked about immigration quite a bit on the campaign trail, and is an action that he can do through executive order, which would have an immediate effect. So again, it's going to be a little bit of a mixed bag in terms of those things that we'll see immediately right out of the gate. Versus some of those things that will either take time to implement through the federal system, or are going to be challenged legally and are going to have to make their way through the court system before there's any action that can be taken on those issues, and again, specifically on the Dreamers and DACA.
Can you compare and contrast? You talk about this issue of trust and how these executive orders, implementing things he promised on the campaign trail that Donald Trump would do, and he's doing it, or at least trying to do it. Can you compare and contrast that to Joe Biden, and especially in light of his recent pardons, not only of the likes of Anthony Fauci and General Milley and those people, but and like Liz Cheney, but also his own family. And he promised 4 years ago he would never do anything of that sort. And all this rhetoric out there that no one is above the law, including if your last name is Trump, but if your last name is Biden, it seems to be the case. Do you think the American people, I mean, what's the perspective do you think that the Americans look at Joe Biden now based on his previous statements that he would never do such a thing? And accusing Donald Trump of attempting to do those very things that he has now done in spades, and protected his family from, these are pardons of things that they have not even been charged with yet over the past 10 years. How do you think the American people looks at that?
Well, I think when he left office, his approval rating was really low, and going back and using that word trust in him and trust in his administration was incredibly low, and this was obviously pre pardons. So I obviously those actions aren't going to help increase his standing. I think at the end of the day, he came across as someone who was just a typical politician who was going to say things but not really mean them, not follow through on them, was going to actually, in some instances, do the opposite of what he said. And again, the poll numbers reflect that. And I said this again previously, that people want to say, oh, it's just Republicans or conservative leaning independents, but that's not the case. What the polling showed is that Democrats and even left leaning independents on a number of the key issues, whether it was taxes, whether it was immigration, whether it was border security, actually disapproved of how Joe Biden handled his job. So again, I think he leaves office in a very low place, and so their job, I think, Jill's job and his job is to build a presidential library and try to rehabilitate the best you can a reputation. But again, and then you contrast that with, again, Donald Trump, who said, on day one, I'm going to come into the office and this is what I'm going to do. And on day one, that is exactly what he did. So again, the things that he can do via executive order, the things that he has control over, are things that he has stepped into the breach and executed on. So it's not a surprise, right? I mean, people, when in Trump's first term, they didn't really oppose. So many of the things that he did, especially economically, they were just a little bit off put by some of his words, by some of the tweets and things of that nature, and it made them a little bit nervous. But coming back in, people are excited about the things that he's going to attempt to do. People understand that using tariffs as a way to negotiate and have better deals for America. My sincere hope is that America first doesn't mean America alone, but certainly coming in and looking out for the interests of our citizens, our people, and doing it in a manner that is consistent with the way that he campaigned is what people are expecting to see. And again, on day one and day two, he's delivered. And again, that's not, I don't think, something that you can compare and contrast because the differences are so wide in terms of how the two approach it. And again, I would also say I think Joe Biden focused so much on the macro issues, and Donald Trump focuses on the issues that affect people's daily lives, the things that they talk about around the kitchen table, the things that you can feel, tangible things that you can feel in your pocketbook. Versus high, lofty numbers that Joe Biden tried to convince us with, that everything was fine, that the economy is fine, that our lives were just okay. So again, I think you see someone like Donald Trump really dialed into what affects individuals' lives. How do we grow our economy? How do we make things stronger here in America for American citizens? And again, that then bleeds into the issue of immigration. And again, I think Donald Trump's doing exactly what people should have expected him to do when coming back into the Oval Office.
It's incredibly ironic to me because you mentioned on a couple occasions here that Donald Trump is focused on making individual people's lives better, essentially. And I wasn't planning to ask you about this, but I think there still is going to be this tactic that some Democrats use to characterize or categorize Donald Trump as this threat to individuals. And even Jocelyn Benson, I think prematurely announced that she was going to be running for governor, but she put out a video saying that she has been traveling the state and she hears you. Speaking of the people in the state of Michigan, that she understands that there are people who are telling her that they feel very unsafe under a Donald Trump presidency, and I'm going to address those issues as if he's some threat to people, like he's going to go round up individuals, like Debbie Dingell was saying that he's going to have these internment camps and bring people and put them in there. There's this is still this messaging that's going out there. Jocelyn Benson, now running for governor of Michigan for 2026, seems to be still tapping into that. Do you think that is effective still today, or maybe as much as it was 4 years ago?
I think if it was effective, Kamala Harris would have been president.
Yeah.
They ran solely on a message of trying to scare the American people. They offered no plan for them, and so what we saw was, and again, it wasn't, I think there's this sense that there was just a certain segment of the population that came out and supported Donald Trump. But the truth of the matter is that he made gains in every different type of demographic, whether we're talking about younger voters, whether you're talking Asian American voters, whether you're talking Black voters, whether you're talking female voters, and even female voters with a college education. His numbers increased, and people can say, okay, well, he didn't win those groups. It's not about whether or not you win those groups. What it is do you have a message that reaches across all segments? Is it a
Mm.
message that is broadly viewed as inclusive to your views, whether they're religious views, whether they're social views, whether they are cultural views, whether they are economic views? And so when people talk about a mandate, that Donald Trump has a mandate, they want to point and say, well, he didn't really win the popular vote by that much. But again, it misses the point that his message touched every segment of the voting
Yes.
population.
Mm.
And that was able to expand his coalition. So people can try to campaign on negative stereotypes, but the thing is, now that he's in office and as things actually happen and better people's lives, it becomes less of a significant message. And if you want to target it to a very specific demographic, you can, but that's not what's going to win the state of Michigan or any of these other states that are purple states that went for Trump 2 out of the last 3 presidential elections.
Mm. I am very curious as to how, Donald Trump's approach to energy is going to look like as we go into the rest of 2025 and into his second term. And he declared this national energy emergency, and he kind of blamed a lot of it on the Green New Deal policies of the Joe Biden administration. And he wants to revive domestic energy, priorities, drill, baby, drill. How will that, in your view, you study these issues. How will that focus and priority of drilling again for, oil and, fossil fuels, an emphasis on that and the reliability of fossil fuels, how does that tie into issues such as cost of living, inflation, and, the economic um, feasibility in this country?
Sure. Well, I mean, one of the things that it does is it reestablishes national security in the sense that we aren't dependent upon other people to produce oil, to produce energy for ourselves. Obviously, it helps drive down a bit the cost of gasoline if we can also be a next net exporter of oil and energy, and that obviously helps grow our economy. And these all have effects on our cost of living and actually improving the quality of life here in the United States. I do think when it comes to energy, states like Michigan have gone. I wouldn't say all in, but they certainly lean very heavy to electric vehicles
Hmm.
and the electrification of our environment, our living environment. So it's going to be interesting to see how we pivot there. I would say, to a certain extent, the EV market is where the big three automakers actually lose most of their money. And so when you talk about what sells, it is the bigger trucks, is the bigger vehicles. So the fact that maybe they don't have to focus as much on producing EVs to meet some of these mandates, and that they can focus a little bit more on the vehicles that are actually bigger, selling and more profit producing for the companies. Again, that is something that will help the economy, not only here in Michigan but across the United States. So as these things start to come out, there are going to be the little tangential things that um, we'll look at and see what the trickle down effect is. But again, I mean, energy security, energy independence is something that is very beneficial for our national security, and again, independence. And I do think that that is something that the people expected and voted Donald Trump into the office to
Yeah.
again increase our national security and our energy independence.
Yeah, national security, gas. Probably, I'm going to be watching gas prices to see if there's going to be a change when it comes to the EV mandates. Do you feel like the big three automakers, Michigan, that they welcome this Donald Trump presidency based on that issue alone?
Well, I mean, yes and no, right? Do they welcome the presidency? Yes. Do they, quietly, do I think they are appreciative that they don't have to hit these mandates and create vehicles that really no one's buying and requires government subsidies to help them buy? Yes. I do think the issue with Canada and Mexico and some of the tariffs are something that here in Michigan we're very cautious about, very, very, in tune to, because that is something that directly affects Michigan's economy. Again, there is also the potential for a microchip campus being built just outside of Flint. It's about a $55 billion investment in the state, which
Mm,
now falls to Donald
yeah.
Trump's Commerce Secretary. So again, that I think is something we here in Michigan are watching, that sort of plays in that space, because creating a semiconductor campus here, and again, kind of helping with the supply chain issues that we saw happen over COVID, and again, independence from relying on China and other countries to supply these kind of things. That's a huge deal, and a huge deal for us here in Michigan. So. Yes, I think that there are aspects of the Donald Trump presidency that the big three look at and say, okay, this is something that we can live with. This is something that actually helps their bottom line. And then
Yeah.
there's some other issues that they really want to see, how it all plays out, and is maybe using tariffs against Mexico and Canada and saying we're going to start that on February 1. Is that a way to draw them to the table and have a conversation about the North American Trade Agreement, which in the original deal they were going to have conversations about in 2026. The Trump administration wants to have that, now, and so maybe this
A
is a
few
way to
days.
bring them to the table.
Yeah, pretty crazy. And this whole idea of an external revenue service, I mean, it's intriguing, collecting tariffs rather than taxes, but going out and getting tariffs from these other countries. Any idea do you think that's going to benefit some American companies right now? Maybe not the in the semiconductor sector, but some traditional blue chip type of companies. Do you think that benefits them if they're already American based, or are they not in favor of this beautiful word that he describes, tariffs? Maybe they're not so into that idea.
Yeah, I think there is that because there are going to be, again, we expect and what most economists say is, you can call it a tariff, but it's going to be a tax on the consumer because it's going to get passed along. So there are going to be some, a lot of companies and a lot of industries that are not necessarily going to find this approach because then there's going to be reciprocal trade wars against the products that we're exporting. I think really what more people are looking at when it comes to growing the economy and things like that is what the Department of Government Efficiency can find. Going back to the DEI issue, that there was a review done that showed that there's approximately $120 billion that the government spends on DEI initiatives, and so by bringing that money back into the budget, into the House, is that something that will help our economy? And again, then these companies won't have to have DEI programs, mandated upon them, and the costs associated with that. So yeah, again, the economy is a huge issue. There's many different facets to it, whether it's taxes, whether it's tariffs, whether it's sanctions, or whether it's unnecessary expenditures on programs that the government really doesn't want and shouldn't really be involved in. So again, right? I
Right.
mean, what did people want? People wanted Donald Trump to improve our quality of life, to help with daily costs and things like that. And again, he's coming in and he's looking at the issues that are going to help in that regard.
Yeah, very good. Always appreciate it. Dennis Darnoi is the founder of Densar Consulting. Dennis, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Good to see you.
Thank you, Tom. Have a great day.
All right, you do the same. Thanks so much. Yeah, it's interesting. I have mixed feelings about this whole idea of tariffs. I do think that it could. I think it's largely a negotiating strategy from Donald Trump, but he also feels like we're paying all these tariffs in their countries, and they're not doing the same thing here. Does it benefit us? Does it hurt us? Is it going to act as a sales tax? We'll find out how that, and is it going to benefit American companies because it stifles the competition from these overseas industries or the companies from overseas? We'll find out. Maybe it brings the plants back to the United States, which there has been some indication that that is going to, in fact, be the case. I want to bring up some of these executive orders again because this whole idea of diversity, equity, inclusion. He made this announcement yesterday. It's just they're going to be gone. And as Dennis alluded to, there's been some very lucrative careers, corporate careers that have been born on the backs of the DEI industry. We're talking $300,000 jobs for being a DEI officer of some company. And what is it? In my view, it is incredibly discriminatory because by this whole notion of it being inclusive, it's actually incredibly exclusive. You're excluding people based on their immutable traits, their race and their gender and their identity and whom they think they are as a person, and that's how you hire them because you want to have diversity. I love diversity as well, but that shouldn't be the mandate on why you're hired based on your skin color. It's very discriminatory. So he's going to end the DEI policies in restoring what he calls merit-based opportunity and civil rights. By the way, it was a sweeping move to uphold civil rights and restore this culture of meritocracy. So Trump signs this historic executive order. It was Monday, he signed it, but he was basically dismantling federally sanctioned diversity, equity, and inclusion, and diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility mandates. And it basically, the order that he puts out, he's targeting the illegal race and sex-based preferences in federal agencies and in contracts with vendors and grants. You get money based on your skin color. And he's going to emphasize individual excellence and really, truly equal opportunity under the law in this country. He said this, he said, hardworking Americans should never be denied opportunity because of their race or their sex. And he said the executive order protects the promise of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and that it ensures all Americans are judged by their character and capability, not by these very divisive identity quotas. And so going back to the real American way, civil liberties, civil rights, and the order provokes, I think, a lot of pushback from a lot of people, but it's going to take away some key DEI era executive actions, including affirmative action mandates for federal contractors. So this goes back to the quota issue. It prohibits agencies from enforcing DEI policies that prioritize identity over merit. It also directs federal departments to streamline contracting, reduce costs, and mandate compliance with anti discrimination laws. And the executive order also challenges the private sector DEI practices by empowering agencies to investigate and to deter discriminatory policies in corporations, universities, and major institutions. I say good riddance. It is so discriminatory. These, under the guise of diversity, equity, it's not equality and inclusion. You have to exclude. And I'll tell you this story. I know somebody who went to a DEI office on a school campus who wanted to be included because I won't say the gender either. He or she felt left out based on her condition. I said her. And they told her, no, sorry, we don't accept that. You're going to have to go to that other office over there. They excluded that individual. It was not inclusive. It's only inclusive based on your skin color, at least in that office, or your sexual identity. If you were transgender or homosexual, then they will talk to you. But they told this person to go somewhere else. That was kind of the feeling. It was very exclusionatory in these DEI offices and these mandates. That's what they led to, discriminatory practices. Also, this was very interesting. Stargate. I'm not sure how I feel about this. I'm kind of concerned, actually, about it. Donald Trump unveiled this $500 billion AI infrastructure project with those three people there that represent SoftBank, OpenAI, and Oracle. Trump kicked off the second term with this historic announcement. It is a major announcement. He promised when it was coming. This, I think, was unexpected from a lot of people. But basically what he did is he unveiled the largest AI infrastructure project in history, and it's dubbed Stargate. It's $500 billion. It's an initiative that's this joint venture between those private industries there, and that's the guy from Oracle and SoftBank, and then OpenAI is there also. They're very grateful. These are the big tech guys that are joining in partnership with Donald Trump's administration. So he announced this yesterday from the White House, and he was joined by those respective CEOs in those companies. That's Larry Ellison right there from Oracle, and then you see right there that's Masayoshi Son. He's with SoftBank. And then you're going to see, of course, OpenAI's Sam Altman, of course, very, very well known for establishing ChatGPT. But they were outlining the project's vision, and they say it's basically a network of state-of-the-art data centers across the United States to power AI innovation. And the first phase will begin with a $100 billion investment, and that will launch the flagship headquarters, I guess, if you want to call it, the facility there in Texas. And they said that, this is by far the largest artificial intelligence infrastructure project in history, and it's going to be starting off in Texas. There's Sam Altman right there. He says, listen, the potential is huge. It can solidify America's leadership, of course, in technology across the world while creating thousands of high-tech jobs as well. But it builds on, Donald Trump's strategy to attract private investment into American industries. And that's what Sam Altman was saying yesterday, that this is so important that we do it within this very country. So he said, I'm very grateful to you, Mr. President, for starting off this initiative and allowing for this to happen right here in the United States of America. He's already secured these commitments of $1 trillion in private sector funding. $1 trillion in private sector funding for the U.S. infrastructure and innovation projects. So they're talking about this is going to revolutionize healthcare. Some of the comments they made yesterday talked about how cancer can be diagnosed incredibly early to the point where they can make these personalized vaccines within like a 45-minute period based on artificial intelligence and being able to detect the proclivity for cancer in your blood ahead of time, and then developing a customized vaccine for that individual in a matter of minutes using artificial intelligence. It seems a little concerning to me on that point. I'm not. This needs to be. I think AI moves so quickly. I'm a little bit concerned about that. I'd be curious of what your position is on this as well. If you want to share that in the comment section or ask questions on Facebook, X, or YouTube. Of course, we're going to be living on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well. But what do you think about this? Are you concerned about it, or do you welcome it? Because it's going to happen anyway. So let's at least lead the charge here in the United States of America. All right, those are some of your headlines from this brand new administration in the Oval Office, Donald Trump. It does feel like a completely new era. So what do you think? Let me know. Cameron Harris watching the comments here. And if there are any questions as well, let's bring them up one by one. Cameron Harris. Arlene Pearson. Hi, Arlene. Good to see you. Joe Biden is worse than a regular politician, in my opinion. He and his family are corrupt to the core with a complicit mainstream media. You see what I'm doing? I'm interpreting your acronyms here because I'm in the know now. MSM, mainstream media. Parts of the government and fellow Democrats who covered for him and his family's corruption and lately his dementia. They totally did. Arlene, you're absolutely correct on that point. It was so much collusion going on in this country, and they also colluded to pretend that the other side was colluding, and they're very dangerous. But what they had been doing here has been covering up so much information. Joe Biden, I do believe, and I'm sad to say this, because back in the day, I thought maybe he's a pretty good guy. He comes across as jovial, just like your next door neighbor, and as if he really cares and tells the truth. But he's been caught in so many lies over so many decades. And they just all came, it seemed like they just got worse and worse the older he got. And then he became president, and the lies amplified and multiplied under his administration. And the mainstream media was very much involved in that. I hate to say it. And it was sad to me in particular on that point, because I did leave an industry I loved. I loved what I thought was objective journalism for so many years of my career. And then I saw just going more and more really to the left, but not objective whatsoever in newsrooms all over the country. And I don't mean to identify just a few newsrooms on places where I worked. It was happening all over the United States. And it was amazing to see that. I think it was this combination. You mentioned government, you mentioned politicians, you mentioned the media, but I also think academia had a big part of it, because in these universities, in these journalism programs, they're teaching this new brand of journalism, which in my view is simply activism. And there are some good journalism professors out there. I got a dear friend of mine who is one as well, and he's into the creative storytelling. But unfortunately, those are far and few between in terms of the overall premise on what they're building these programs upon. I'll also say this, that Hillsdale College has an amazing, data-driven, fact-based methodology of creating a news story, making sure it's based on fact and it is objective. These are objective facts, like original documents. Just don't take someone's word for it and throw it up on the screen or on a newspaper or on television or on your radio airwaves. Do your due diligence as a reporter. And I'm grateful that Hillsdale teaches it that way. And I think there's a few good people at Michigan State University. A professor I know over there does a phenomenal job, and I greatly respect him. So anyway, but again, they're few and far between. Thanks so much, Arlene. Let's bring up another one. So Orlando Hodges is back. Hey, Orlando. Hey, Tom. I love Liberation Day. It was better than watching a movie with popcorn. Watching top Democrats' faces during the inauguration speech was priceless. I noticed that as well. And if you remember back to 2017, Donald Trump's first inauguration speech, he was very bold and in the face of the Obamas who were there and the Clintons and, the far left at that point. And he was, they were highly offended by him, and there were a lot of protests there. This time around, though, the sense I got is he was just as bold, but he had a lot of basically evidence to back up his statements on, because the past 4 years were very illustrative of what has happened based on these very far left progressive policies and how they are ruining our country. And they end up doing the opposite of freeing people individually. They were suppressing individuals on a scale that I thought I would not see in my lifetime in this country. And he called them out for it. And lawfare and the weaponization of the Department of Justice and the attack on free speech and attack on the free markets and the attack on our border security and national sovereignty and our place and our standing in the world and the reliance and the adherence to global institutions. I mean, it was all of that was happening in our lifetime, and they were targeting conservatives. You talk about the DIJ and the FBI going after conservative individuals and completely ignoring the violent leftists in this country. It's just amazing to me what's happening. So, yeah, I was enjoying it as well. I do sense there's now a sense of freedom, liberation, and a protection of every individual's civil rights in this country. Orlando Hodges, good to hear from you, buddy. Thank you so much. Let's bring up another one here. It is Jim Chakowski. Hey, Jim. Jim's back. Good to see you. In regard to tariffs, China was declared an emerging nation years ago, which left them off the hook for many responsibilities and gave them many advantages. Yeah, why hasn't that changed? They say that in government, when there's something that's temporary, what they mean is it's going to be permanent. And that little status of China, an emerging country, which now is the greatest national security threat to the United States of America, yeah, I think it's time to change that status on China. Very good point, Jim. Thanks so much. Let's bring up another if we got one. It's, Dave Moody. Hi, Dave. Good to see you. I gave up on the blame stream media long ago. I hope you will continue to question everything and keep us non-TV watchers updated on everything. Dave, I am so with you. I never thought, because of the way I grew up and really, prioritizing news as kind of an important institution, the journalism industry in this country, because back then I think it was, I never thought I'd come to the point where I would stop watching television news. And I have. I read a lot, and then you can compare and contrast in the articles and try to find. It's very difficult even in that realm to do. But if you have like at least local TV stations, no, I don't. I don't remember the last time I watched a local television newscast. And the network newscasts, they're a joke. You think about David Muir, and you think about Lester Holt, and their condescending coverage of as if they've now established some realm of common sense based on these very false premises now that they've built in order to cover news nowadays. It's sad to see, but I think no one has exposed himself more on that level as David Muir, as even when he went out to the fires, and just it's all about him. It's all about his looks and his delivery and his style, but also his far leftist views, and making sure you attack conservatives as a threat, and then you welcome the comments from the Democrats. That was David Muir's approach, and at large part it was Lester Holt's approach too. Nora O'Donnell, yeah, she's not very good, and she exposed herself too on her debate, her moderation of that debate. It was just very, very leftist and very one-sided. So I'm with you, Dave. Thank you for your comments. Appreciate it. One more here, and then we're going to say so long for today. This one's from Scott Bosch. Scott is a dear friend of mine. I love you, man. Happy birthday, brother. Scott, thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, today's my birthday. I keep forgetting it's my birthday. You get to a certain age, like me now that I'm 32 years old. It doesn't, no, I'm not 32. That would be did I hear a scoff in the back like you already knew that? Yeah, I know. It's obvious. That would be disinformation. Yeah, I'm proud to say I'm 55 years old today. And I am now eligible to live in one of those, places, the 55-plus communities. So I've arrived. Hey, God bless you. Thank you for your time paying attention today. We'll be back here tomorrow, of course, TomJordanLive.com, 9 a.m. Eastern. Thank you so much. God bless.